And I'd like to welcome you all, folks, to November 4th, 2019, Truth versus News. This is a great show here. I guess you can't see that. Okay. Anyway, uh, excuse me. We got Jim Fetcher, the most dangerous miner in America, and Scott Bennett, who's the most prominent international researcher that I've known. And we're so blessed to have them. And we got all kinds of things that are happening, I guess, on the world front right now. It's getting pretty heavy, isn't it, Jim? Go ahead.
Okay, Don. I begin with what may be the cracking of a false flag attack that was planned for 5 European cities by Ole Damegard, who's become quite brilliant at anticipating these events. It was called Sea Eagle, intended to occur on October 23rd and 24th in 5 European cities: London, Manchester, Barcelona, Paris, Rotterdam, and 2 nuclear power plants in Sweden. Ole received a notification from a naval officer in the Danish Navy about Rotterdam as a potential target. In the maritime world, Rotterdam is known as the maritime gateway to Europe. The reason is most commercial ships with food and goods from outside Europe pass through here. If Rotterdam were shut down, food supplies would be short in many countries in Europe within a few days. During his training in the Navy, he set up the scenario of terrorists closing down the port, since it can be done cheaply with very few resources and manpower and have a huge effect, both on people emotionally and on EU economically, just a shared thought. It did not occur, and instead we had this emergency meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels. And Ole believes, and I'm inclined to agree with him, that they were upset because they'd been called out and couldn't go forward with a rather elaborate attack, that they're worried about resurrecting NATO, that this event, had it taken place, would have had a reinvigorated the organization, where the situation raises a broader question of what will become of the alliance now that the U.S. has decided to step down from its imperial throne, having already taken steps in that direction. Nature abhorring a vacuum, Germany, Benelux, and France are obvious candidates as a group to take over the task, although they lack the necessary means. Germany prefers to remain within the framework of the alliance, while France envisions a change to take place within the structure of the European Union, without both the US and the United Kingdom assuming Brexit takes place. As an historical reminder, we had the collapse of the USSR. The Warsaw Pact didn't survive Moscow's recognition of the independence of its member states. In 1990, Mikhail Gorbachev declared Moscow was no longer in a position to dictate its law to its allies. We had the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the agreement by the West not to infringe upon the sovereignty of the Eastern Bloc nations, which of course we violated beginning in 1990. It looks to me like NATO is tattered and torn. Scott, I'm very keen to have your comments on these developments.
Well, Admiral Mackinder, of course, was the author of military geopolitical thinking and dividing the world up into 3 main segments: the Heartland, the Rhineland, and the Oceania. And the Heartland is Asia, Russia, the steppe, Central Asia countries. The Rhineland are the coastline countries that are the coastline of Europe along the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, Europe. And Oceania is South America, Great Britain, and Australia, the big islands, if you will. And, he lays out some pretty interesting military strategy, geopolitical scenarios that have been followed by Napoleon and Hitler, specifically the attempt to control the heartland. Asia, Russia, the resources controls the world, but yet no one's been able to do that because of the Russian personality. And that, I don't think that'll ever change. And it's only emboldened and strengthened by things like these silly sanctions and this metrosexual transgender European American culture of effeminacy and madness that we see unfolding with each day as the calendar goes by in the West and America. There is a serious mental breakdown, disintegration, schizophrenia that has taken hold. It's like a blood virus, a sepsis, if you will, a political sepsis. And, America is getting worse. Prime example is, I think, Trump's declaration of seizing the Syrian oil. And I know we're going to get into that, but that is a very bad optic for the world. So all of this leads to a false flag in Rotterdam is a very real scenario because it deals with a Rhineland heartland scenario. It is the only thing that could rejuvenate NATO is if they said the Russians did this. The Russians came in and blew up the port of Rotterdam. The Russians have agents there. The Russians are trying to splinter NATO. So all of NATO needs to become a police tyranny state as one bloc, 1 euro, Britain, France, Germany, even Scandinavia, and all these countries, they all need to be bound against the Russian menace. So I could see these lunatic minds who are obsessed with this conquest of Russia out of a Catholic hatred for the Russian Orthodox or a hatred for the Russians because they have come out of the dystopia of communism and now are a free people. Whatever the motivations, there's tremendous demonic hatred for Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church, which fuels a lot of this hyper-nationalism and propaganda and paranoia by the West, constantly saying that Russia is the menace, and it's not. So this scenario of a Sea Eagle false flag in the port of Rotterdam certainly could be a reality. There's also been a talk, Jim, of a false flag attack on November 3rd in a football stadium up in Seattle, and that hasn't come to pass, and there's a lot of suspicion it's because people pray and it's exposed so they can't do it. And this may be a similar scenario where they are not able to execute this false flag attack in Rotterdam, but be advised, I think they are desperately trying to drive a wedge against Russia and Europe and America. And the way to do that is with a false flag and blaming the Russians. That's what they're constantly doing, and blaming the Russians for invading Crimea, seizing Ukraine, coming into Syria and stopping the liberation movement that the Wahhabis in Israel and Saudi Arabia and Obama were originally doing by destroying the Syrian regime and sending thousands of people into Europe. The same that we did with Libya in liberating them from Gaddafi. Oh, and incidentally, raping and pillaging and chopping up women and putting them in refrigerators, as the Moriartys were witness to, and sending tens of thousands of Africans through Libya, through the Mediterranean, up into Spain, up into France, up into Germany. That's been the real fruit of all of this evil that's been done under George Bush, Dick Cheney, Barack Obama, and Trump has a very small window to jump off this sinking ship, or else he's going to go down and Tulsi Gabbard's going to raise the pirate flag and win the victory. Jim?
I thought that was a fantastic commentary, Scott. I think you got it exactly right. Meanwhile, we have the al-Baghdadi question, where Trump has even claimed his likely successor has also been terminated. You can see the location where the compound was leveled to a parking lot with potholes, where the Washington Post mourned the passing of an austere religious scholar. I mean, absolutely stunning stuff. A brilliant piece by Matt Taibbi revealed how the Baghdad story reveals a divided and broken news media. America received two almost completely different versions of the story of al-Baghdadi's pursuit and suicide. If you have two sets of news media, you have none. Listen to what he has to say. Two sets of headlines over the weekend describe the suicide of ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. From the Washington Post Sunday morning. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, austere religious scholar at helm of Islamic State, dies at 48. The Post has since rewritten that, although the description of an austere religious scholar with wire-rimmed glasses remains in the lead paragraph. Meanwhile, the headline on FoxNews.com, al-Baghdadi killed, how the daring military operation went down. The Post headline would fit a quiet academic who died in his sleep, not a genocidal jihadist leader. The Fox headline is less nuts, but still not quite right. Al-Baghdadi wasn't killed, but reportedly committed suicide while pursued by American military dogs. Donald Trump was correct when he tweeted Sunday night that something bad had happened, but from there, America received two almost completely different versions of the story of al-Baghdadi's pursuit and suicide. It was a vivid demonstration of how dysfunctional the modern news landscape has become. When important events take place now, commercial news outlets instantly slice up the facts and commoditize them for consumption by the respective political demographics. We always had this process to some degree, but it no longer takes days to sift into the op-ed pages. Now news is packaged for Republicans or Democrats on the first reporting pass. Moreover, it's no longer true that Fox is more blatant about its slant than the Democrat-friendly press, which in the Trump years has become a bullhorn of caricatured belly aching in the same way Fox was in the Clinton years. The Trump version of the Baghdadi story was a predictable, heroic cartoon. The Obama administration at least had the decency to seek out a decent director and wait a year or so before the heroic Zero Dark 30 Bin Laden killing epic film was released. Trump decided to skip the Hollywood negotiation and deliver the Bothell movie lines up front. Meanwhile, in what increasingly feels like a monolithic block of anti-Trump media, the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, and so on, the Baghdadi headlines were a remarkable collection of angst-ridden talking points. Even if you're not the kind of person who can ever celebrate a violent helicopter assault that results in the deaths of children, I kept myself in that number. The difference in how the story was covered compared to analogous stories about bin Laden or Abu Masabi al-Zarqawi was striking. Apparently, the salient facts about the death of al-Baghdadi included. Trump did inform some key Democrats about the operation. Trump notified Russians before telling congressional leaders. The Baghdadi raid was complicated by Trump's plans to withdraw from Syria, happening in spite of Trump, not because of him. The raid was a victory built on factors Trump derides. That is, it was a win by intelligence agencies Trump has criticized. Trump's gloating tone contrasted with a more measured tone of Barack Obama after the bin Laden op. The operation was like watching a movie, except there was no live audio. This was the New York Times, where the whimpering and crying detail came from. Trump is going to milk the political benefit of Baghdadi because he needs to, because of impeachment and other problems. Trump's Situation Room photo appeared more staged than Obama's, experts said. In fact, they were taken even before the raid had occurred. Meanwhile, Kurds claim they carried out undercover mission to steal Baghdadi's soiled underwear for DNA tests. It's just unbelievable. While Russia's Lavrov calls Baghdadi a spawn of the U.S. policy and still awaits DNA proof of death, Russia says it's still waiting to see proof. We have not any DNA material that allow us to say with 100% confidence al-Baghdadi was killed, a top Russian military official told reporters Friday. Also, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told Roisa 24 TV channel the Kremlin cannot yet confirm many of the things the U.S. has said. More provocatively, Lavrov added that Washington facilitated the rise of ISIS in the first place. The foreign minister said Baghdadi is, or was, if he is really dead, a spawn of the United States, according to the Russian broadcaster, about which there is no doubt. We know that ISIS was created by John Brennan, then director of the CIA, Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State, and Barack Obama president in 2012 over the adamant opposition of Michael Flynn, the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, to not only put pressure on Bashar al-Assad, but to confront the Persian nation of Iran. It was an outrage at the time, and its remnants remain so today. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, what comes to mind in the original slides you were reading, Jim, is the film Shakespeare in Love, and you should revisit that, because in the beginning of the film, the playwright guy is saying, "There's no bit with a dog. Where's the dog? We've got to have a play with a dog. We need a little dog barking and all this." So they got to have a bit with a dog. Yeah, we got to throw in a little doggy that went chasing him down. Lassie, come home. You know, T-Rex, tear him apart. And so all the fat, flatulent, stupid women in America and the effeminate beta males in America just kind of go, oh, yes, the dog, the SPCA, I'm going to keep giving. They're fighting terrorists. Come on. I mean, I just have to laugh at that, Jim. I mean, what's a bit with a dog? No, it's theatrics. It's all nonsense. It's all Osama bin Laden 2.0. Burying him at sea. No, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. Assad has been up there and said the same thing. You know, burying him at sea. Didn't we see this movie before? I mean, the worst thing about B movies is, you know, like Jaws 2 was never as good as Jaws 1. And to do this all over again, I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. And it doesn't work because the Russians aren't taking the bait either. They're going, no, we did not help you. We want nothing to do with you. You were the ones who created ISIS. You know, the Russians aren't giving Trump anything, which is very ominous to me. That's kind of disturbing. So the Russians aren't playing ball. They're not being nice. They're not saying, oh, yeah, we'll side with you, Mr. Trump. In fact, the Russians are Russians. You know, they're very cold, and they kind of go, why should we say anything to you? You've been having us on sanctions for 4 years for a bunch of crap. You think we're going to throw you a bone now, Trump, and say, yes, we helped them. We're fighting together. They said bullshit. This whole thing was a lie. The Iranians have said it's a lie, too. And I mean, we know it is. And I said it on Press TV. I said, this is all for dramatic political consumption. But be that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and be that the Democrats are the worst thing since the Black Plague when it comes to American politics, I'll take any chance to knock the stool out from underneath the Democrats and expose them as the demoniac lunatics they are. So yeah, I'll happily back and push Trump in a positive momentum about this. And I said on Press TV, this gives a momentous change where now that Baghdadi is gone, great, everything's fine. We can all go back to the picnic table and say, let's have a talk. Let's have a cup of wine. Let's have the Syrian president, the Russian president, the Iranian president, the American president, and say to Netanyahu, no, you're not invited to this party. You stay the hell out. You're nothing but a troublemaker. You'll be told what you need to be told. I'd like to see that in an American foreign policy. I'd like to see that as a constitutional issue. But it sets the stage for the Americans to go and have a conversation and start parsing this up. But unfortunately, that hasn't yet happened yet, and it looks really ugly when Trump says, I want to keep the oil. You know, I want to go and keep the oil, and I'm keeping U.S. troops to keep the oil in Syria. That's just, you know, that's like taking a big bucket of sewer water and throwing it all over the birthday cake that was just made and just about to light the candles with a supermodel popping out of the middle. He dumps a big bucket of sewer water and everything's destroyed because now the whole world goes, what the hell? You're taking oil, you're thieving, you're raping and pillaging the ground of Syria. You're now going in there. That was your agenda. Oh, now we know why you're in Venezuela. There's a whole negative domino effect that can run in this oil. And it starts with Joe Biden saying, oh, that's a terrible thing for Trump to do. Now suddenly everybody goes, yeah, I don't like Biden, but I like what he said there because I don't like going in other countries and taking their oil. So it's an attempt for Trump to shift things in a positive direction, and I support that, of course. Baghdadi, I think he was dead a long time ago. And anybody who knows these Arab people, they do not wear underwear. They don't wear underwear. Oh. They wear man dresses. They don't use toilet paper. They just pull up the man dress, squat down, wipe it with their left hand, and smear it all over the porta potty on the military base, and then they trot off looking for their next goat. So Baghdadi, I think, is gone for a long time. What's disturbing to me is Khomeini, the religious leader, is saying Macron is naive or he's a patsy because we are not having any conversations with the United States, period. And I think he is wrong to say that because in my perspective, in my philosophy, you need to sit down with another country, and Khomeini and the Iranians need to sit down with the Americans, if for nothing more than to do this. You are wrong, Mr. Trump. We are right. God's on our side. He's not on yours. He's going to judge you for all of your perversion, your corruption, your sexual dysfunction, your transgenderism, your lunatic feminism, your environmental religion of worship. You have worshiped the creation more than the creator, and you are a cursed country and a cursed people and a cursed culture because of it. And all of your wealth and all of your oil is going to be destroyed under the weight of your own arrogance. Now, we've said what we want to say, and we'll just say we're not making any new deals. If you want to have a deal and a friendship with us, lift all the sanctions and we'll have a discussion. And then they get up and they walk away from the table. That's the value for always talking to your enemy, is because you get the first word and the last word. And I can't imagine anybody to punch in the nose that would make me feel better if I was an Iranian or Russian or anybody with common sense than John Bolton. So there you go, Jim.
Well, I think you just covered the next half a dozen stories, Scott, which substantiate everything you've been saying. So we're not going to have to debate Baghdadi, boxers or briefs, huh? Baghdadi's body chucked out of an airplane into the ocean. This is completely absurd. From Reuters, Baghdadi given burial at sea afforded religious rights, U.S. officials. The United States had given the remains of Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi a burial at sea and afforded him religious rights according to Islamic custom after he was killed in a U.S. commando raid in Syria on Saturday, 3 officials told Reuters. Baghdadi, an Iraqi jihadist who rose from obscurity to declare himself caliph of all Muslims as the leader of Islamic State, died by detonating a suicide vest after fleeing into a dead-end tunnel. Sounds like a cave to me, as elite U.S. Special Forces closed in at the weekend. The U.S. officials who spoke on condition of anonymity, of course, did not disclose where the ritual was performed or how long it lasted. 2 officials said they believed his remains were delivered to the sea from an aircraft. Baghdadi's remains were transported to a secure facility to confirm his identity with forensic DNA testing, said U.S. Army General Mark Miley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. As the author highlighted in 2011, after the Obama administration supposedly had Osama thrown into the ocean in accordance with Islam, Islamic scholars told the AP such sea burials run completely contrary to the standard Muslim practice of placing the body in a grave with a head pointed toward the holy city of Mecca. Meanwhile, we get too many shades of Osama bin Laden. I did a great deal of research on this as the head of Scholars for 9/11 Truth at the time, and about Zero Dark 30, where we discovered that Osama bin Laden was not killed on 2 May 2011 during a raid on a compound in Pakistan, but actually died in Afghanistan on or about 15 December 2001 and was buried there in an unmarked grave. Local obituaries reported his death at the time. Even Fox News and CNN subsequently confirmed it on the 26th of December 2001. He was buried in an unmarked grave in accordance with Muslim tradition. He did not die in Pakistan. But it was politically beneficial for Barack Obama to resuscitate him and have him die again 10 years later. The whole thing was totally fraudulent. The photograph of a man with a television clicker in his hand was of the owner of the compound in Pakistan, not Osama bin Laden. In fact, there was a staged photograph in the White House that showed members of the Obama administration, including Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, watching a large screen TV, which was reported as following the event in real time as it occurred, until Leon Panetta, then the director of the CIA, revealed there'd been no live coverage for the first 20 or 25 minutes, which was the entire lapse time for the whole operation. So what's going on here have been just as fraudulent as the coverage of Osama, who, by the way, was our man in Afghanistan. He was instrumental in getting Stinger missiles into the hands of the Mujahideen, which they used to shoot down Soviet helicopters and planes. He was an officer in the CIA, Colonel Tim Osman. He was even visited in a hospital in Dubai by an official of the agency shortly before his death. David Ray Griffin has a whole book about it, Osama bin Laden, Dead or Alive. Nick Kollerstrom, PhD, the leading expert on the London 7/7 subway attacks, has a blog. On my blog at jamesfetzer.org, Osama bin Laden, 1957 to 2001, where you can see images of several of the fake bin Ladens they brought out in order to perpetrate the fraud. Meanwhile, Zero Hedge hasty burial at sea and other Baghdadi raid details eerily parallel to bin Laden death mythology. Years after the 2011 Navy SEAL raid on the Abbottabad, Pakistan compound, which killed Osama bin Laden, a bombshell investigation published in 2015 by Seymour Hersh debunked key elements of the Obama administration narrative, especially related to the hasty disposal of the bin Laden body. In accordance with Islamic tradition, according to Hersh's sources, there was no burial at sea given because there wasn't much left of bin Laden since his body had been torn apart by rifle fire. Instead, pieces of the corpse were tossed out over the Hindu Kush Mountains. This is another layer of complete baloney, disinformation, bullshit coming from Seymour Hersh, alas. Here we have now, days later, another epic raid on another of the world's #1 terrorist leaders' compound with the same hasty burial at sea, but it's all utter nonsense. Authorities would not reveal details about which U.S. Navy ship was used for the burial, in which body of water it took place, but told ABC News the procedure was similar to the one used to dispose of the remains of al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden, where the parallels indicate this is all completely fabricated and fake. Very embarrassing, in my opinion. Even Bashir al-Assad doubts the al-Baghdadi death. American politics are no different than Hollywood. Syrian dictator, actually president, democratically elected Bashir al-Assad echoed Russian doubts about the death of the Islamic State Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in an extensive interview published Friday, attributing most American political developments to Hollywood. Scott, this all reinforces the points you've been making already, but I'd like whatever you care to add.
Well, of course, as the esteemed philosopher said, no bit with a dog. No bit with a dog anywhere. Where's the bit with a dog? Oh, we got a little dog chasing him down a tunnel, and then he blows himself up, and the tunnel smashes, and everything's turned to mush, and then he disappears over the sea. It's all lies and stupid, and it's inconsistent with military practice. It's inconsistent with military rules of engagement with the Russians. They would have talked with the Russians. They would have given the Russians DNA. Trump's desire to have a relationship with Russia, this would have been one of the key factors to say, we got him, you didn't. Here's his guts. Here's his DNA. We can prove it. Now let's shake hands and give us a little trophy. That didn't happen. So that means the death did not happen. So Baghdadi wasn't killed. This is all theatrics. Trump may know about it. He may not. Remember, the military are very good at a bunch of stupid people in uniform calling themselves warriors when they're nothing but postal workers and bureaucrats, most of them, saying, well, we've got to make something happen. Let's just pretend we got him. And let's go to the commander, POTUS. Sir, we've got a good lead. Our military intelligence sources tell us we've got al-Baghdadi in the tunnel. So more to follow, sir. And Trump, who's got a million things, will go, oh, okay. And then they'll say, sir, remember that report we gave you last week? Well, it's coming in. We've got him. We're going to track him. Okay. And then another day goes by. Sir, we got him. He's running down a tunnel. Rin Tin Tin is following him. Oh, keep me informed. And yes, sir. And then boom. So they set this up to be psychologically layers. And it's very easy to deceive Trump. They've done it with the missiles and the Syrian chemical attack that never occurred, prompting Trump to fire 57 cruise missiles, all of which are bad optics. They don't win you anything. The death of America is because of the death of our reputation. The death of our reputation, the transformation of America from the Dr. Jekyll to Mr. Hyde, and let's always remember that, or the picture of Dorian Gray. We were a Ronald Reagan city on a hill. We were a George Washington nation between the seas that was not to get meddled with the civil wars or the fractures or the tribal conflicts of Europe or anywhere else in the world. We were to be a friend to all nations and an enemy to those who made us their enemy. And instead, we have devolved and deformed ourselves since the end of World War II under the scalpel of the CIA and the Mossad and the Zionists and the Jewish lobby that have prostituted and sodomized this country into pursuing just a reckless, self-destructive, Israel first, Zionist first policy, fueled by Christian Zionism, this fever of spiritual darkness that is leading America off the cliff of oblivion like the Pied Piper. But then again, we know God is in charge of all things. God is in charge of the destinies of men and nations. And he is either going to lead America off the cliff into absolute destruction and death and civil war, or he is going to do a renaissance, or he's going to do both. And I think it's going to be both. I think he's raising up leaders, Jim, like you, like myself, like Don, like Michael J., like Paul Taylor, like Ellen Zhao, like so many people that are unable to sit down anymore because God's taken the chair out from under us. So we have to stand up. We have to speak out. We have to speak truth. And ironically, it's the foreign media that are saying, we'd like to hear what you have to say. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are, Jim Fetzer. We'd like to hear what your thoughts and perspectives are on this. What is the truth that we're missing? Says Press TV, says RT, says Russia 24, says Russia 360, says Sputnik. And yet we don't hear this from the BBC. We don't hear this from ABC or NBC or even Fox News. So, all of the American mainstream media are completely deformed and lobotomized, blind. They have no eyes to see. They have no ears to hear. But the world around us certainly does. And I think, America's twilight period is upon us. There is going to be a renaissance and a refracturization. But the next major, uprising of fascism could be China. It certainly is not going to be Russia. I think Russia is going to be the savior of Europe as Europe descends into a civil war, again, self-inflicted by its refugee, Wahhabi, self-impregnation, which is going to give birth to an absolute monstrosity, but will have the same effect. The tribalization and the separation in Europe between conservatives who love family and God and liberty, and those who are maniacs and those who are fascists who use maniacs as their pawns. Jim?
Well, the U.S. media has certainly abdicated all responsibility for serious reporting, can no longer be taken seriously. As you were suggesting, Scott, the optics are terrible. Russia claims U.S. will smuggle 30 million oil out of Syria every month under Trump's criminal plan. Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson has accused the U.S. of criminal activity with regard to President Trump's plan to deploy troops to guard oil fields in eastern Syria. I'm just embarrassed about this beyond words. First, images of U.S. troops occupying Syria's oil fields stir outrage. The reality of American foreign policy all in one stunning image. Regional Iraqi Kurdistan 24 television has broadcast the first footage of the United States Army seizing and protecting a Syrian oil field in the country's northeast. Specifically, the images are of a U.S. armed convoy at Rubilin oil field and are the first to show Trump's order to secure the oil policy in action. A Salon op-ed aptly quips in reaction, "It's about the oil, stupid. Trump wants to end the forever wars, except the one about oil and money. Embarrassing." Meanwhile, arrogant and illegal, Lavrov denounces U.S. military's oil moves in Syria, Russia, Turkish, Iranian press conference. The U.S. was arrogant to send its troops to guard oil fields in Syria, Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov has said, adding it remains unclear from whom the installations need to be protected. The actions of the Americans in Syria violate international law, as their presence in the country is illegal, Lavrov reiterated, appearing alongside his Iranian and Turkish counterparts at a press conference in Geneva, Switzerland. The statement that this U.S. president is needed to protect the oil riches of Syria is arrogant. It turns out they're being protected from Syria itself. Washington's claims that the oil fields needed protection from the Islamic State terrorist group were just a pretext to backtrack on the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Syria, which had earlier been announced by Donald Trump and applauded by many, including Rand Paul. Such a statement sounds especially confusing as back in March, the U.S. had already announced that Islamic State was defeated and crushed. He reminded those in attendance in Geneva. Lavrov, Turkish foreign minister, and Iranian foreign minister got together to discuss the official launch of the Syrian Constitutional Committee to take place in Geneva Wednesday. Another pressing issue on the agenda was the ceasefire in northern Syria negotiated by Russia and Turkey in Sochi last week, due to expire later on Tuesday. The Turkish foreign minister warned that any Kurdish units whom Ankara views as terrorists remaining in the safe zone on the Turkish-Syrian border after the truth ends will be eliminated. However, he observed that Turkey trusts Moscow when it said the Kurds have left the area in accordance with the agreement. Scott, this is all very, very troubling, and I find it embarrassing that Donald Trump would have anything to do with this. Lindsey Graham appears to have played a role in getting him to reverse his course. Pulling the troops out of Syria was a brilliant move. And then he mucked it up by sending these tanks back in to protect the oil fields. Your thoughts?
Yeah, he did. We said it before. It's like he was given this beautiful white birthday cake with multiple layers, and everything was perfect, and he just had to light the candles and say, American people, here you go. I've honored my promise to pull us out of the Middle East wars. And then Lindsey Graham takes his bucket of diarrhea garbage and pours it all over it. And he has just created something that is so heinously repulsive and unappetizing. I mean, let's talk about someone who needs to be hung by the neck until dead as a traitor, Lindsey Graham, for his appearing in Libya next to Baghdadi and these other terrorists, along with John McCain. So Lindsey Graham, if he's telling you to do something, Trump should be doing the opposite. But he's, for whatever reason, this bamboozling sodomite fool is speaking, and the poisonous words are seeping into Trump's advisors, and then advise Trump with bad ideas to do this. And I think I concur 100%, Jim. This is the worst thing that Trump could do. In fact, this very well could cost him the election. This could lose the election for him because it just stinks. You could get troops killed. The troops you're describing being shot at by the Turkish border, that whole convoy could be killed. They could be killed and beheaded and skinned alive in the most heinous ways imaginable. And all sorts of things can follow. Because you're going to the oil, because you're stealing from our mother Syria, you're raping our mother Syria. Remember, these Arabs and Muslims and the whole ideology, they have different ways of defining things and looking at things. So you're not just simply there to take the oil and plant a flag in the oil wells. You are committing an act of rape against traditions and history and the land of Syria. And you may have just turned the entire region really against you. I'm talking Jordan, I'm talking Egypt and Turkey and Russia and Syria. Suddenly America is like Custer surrounded by a bunch of angry Indians, which when before it was just a couple. Now you got all the tribes against you because you're saying with a hubris and an arrogance, I want the oil. Yeah, we're going to keep the oil. We're going to keep the money. It reduces you to something that is addicted to idolatry of money and oil. That's what's so self-deprecating. That's what's so reprehensible, is you've reduced the American people to something that they were before, although it was naive to say, we're going to go around the world and liberate the world with democracy and blah, blah, blah. Now you've taken off that mask, and now you are the picture of Dorian Gray, the monster werewolf out there to consume and steal oil resources. It's not going to last. You could very easily have a United Nations declaration of an international crime that the U.S. is illegally and criminally stealing, just like they said Iraq was doing and against Kuwait. And you could have everything turn against America. And the thing is, Trump needs to always remember the political sloganeering and the bombastic guttural farts and burps by these overweight half-wits at the Trump rallies. Although there are some good people, I admit, there are some lunatic, just nut jobs that are out there, that they are the last people that you want to get an affirmation from. They are the last people that you want to test a political idea or political slogan on, because all they care about is they're spitting out their chaw of chewing tobacco and saying, yeah, America, America first. Yeah, we're going to kick the world's ass. These troglodyte morons have the education of sixth graders. They've never worked in policy. They've never been in the military. They've never been around the world. They've never left portions of Arkansas, Texas, or Mississippi, or wherever they are, California, not many in California. But these people at the Trump rallies are not the fine surgical precision instruments of diplomacy and respect and research that needs to be employed when dealing with other cultures, other sensitivities, other decision-making processes, other hierarchies of value. There's a very real need for research and scholars and emotional intelligence and sensitivity that is nowhere to be seen at these mass political rallies. Yes, it's good. It makes your heart warm. It's like soul food, right? Fried chicken and fried all the other stuff, mashed potatoes and all that. That's good for your soul, Trump. But don't be taking that soul food and making it the national diet of our foreign policy and things like we're going to take the oil. Oh, now we're just going to fire a couple missiles at Iran. Oh, we're going to go in and sink, we're going to go ram a Chinese ship to show them who's boss. Or we're going to go tell the Russians, get the hell out of all of Europe. That's going to be, and I could see it happening because of the blindness and the delusion, that's going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back, or rather the American back. Jim?
I want to just say that I think Assad is really quite sharp in his analysis and things. And stealing oil, that's old becoming new again. We're doing the same thing we've done for years, right? In regime change and
That's
other
right.
things.
Assad is right.
Others.
Assad is right on the money.
Well, the problem is this was such a colossal act of stupidity. I mean,
Yeah.
Trump is generally politically very sensitive. He's brilliant at PR, at marketing, but this was a colossal blunder. And that he allowed Lindsey Graham to reverse policy. It was the worst possible development that could have occurred here, in direct contradiction of his America First policy, Scott. Embarrassing beyond words.
And he sets up Tulsi. Tulsi is now saying, this is the worst thing to do. We don't want to be there for oil. Guess what? Everybody's on the side of Tulsi on this thing. They're on the side of Joe Biden with this thing. Talk about the wrong policy.
You're absolutely right. And now we have French warplanes conducting airstrikes in northeast Iraq. The French defense minister issued a statement Friday confirming they carried out a series of airstrikes in northeastern Iraq, where these French Rafale fighters attacked what they were believed to have been a number of ISIS tunnels in the area. Right. The statement said the strike was carried out with coordination from the anti-ISIS coalition, whoever that would be, and support from a Reaper drone provided by an unnamed coalition member. Meanwhile, Macron is either naive or a U.S. accomplice. Iran's supreme leader blasts the French president's failed mediation efforts. Talking to the Americans is pointless as their demands are endless, and it's strange that French President Emmanuel Macron doesn't understand this. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei said. Macron made a vain attempt to mediate talks between Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and Donald Trump on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in September. As part of this effort, the French leader wanted to persuade Tehran that a single meeting with the US president will solve all the problems. Khamenei told students in Tehran, with the comments later posted on his Twitter page. One wonders if he is really so naive or just an accomplice in working with the UN. Macron's stance was 100% wrong, the Supreme Leader said, recalling that North Korea and Cuba never got the desired sanctions relief despite sitting behind the negotiating table with the Americans. Iran wouldn't have gained anything from the talks with the U.S. either, as Washington would just come up with new demands, don't have missiles with a range of 150 kilometers plus and so forth, he explained. In May, Trump unilaterally withdrew the U.S. from the landmark Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran deal, which curbed Tehran's military nuclear program in exchange for lifting sanctions. He has since then been pushing for a new, broader deal that'll cover not only the nukes, but Iran's ballistic missile developments as well. In other words, their ability to defend themselves. Meanwhile, Trump also freezes Lebanon military aid after Israel voices concerns. Amid recent statements by both Iran and Hezbollah leaders accusing the U.S. of hijacking the massive anti-corruption protests that have gridlocked Lebanon for the past 2 weeks, the White House made the dramatic and unexpected move of freezing U.S. military aid to the Lebanese army. The money, part of a military aid package totaling $105 million, had been approved by Congress and the State Department and requested by the Pentagon. Interestingly, proponents of the package argue it would allow the Lebanese army to grow more independent, making it less cooperative with Hezbollah. According to Reuters, the aid was frozen 2 days following Tuesday's resignation of Lebanese Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri, who in a departing speech admitted he'd reached a dead end amidst the protests, which have reportedly involved 1 million people, up to 25% of Lebanon's total population, and further called on all Lebanese to protect the civil peace. Although no specific reason was given why the White House had targeted Lebanon for an aid freeze, Trump has lately signaled his disdain for the amount of foreign aid Washington hands out around the world, seemingly with no strings attached. However, on Friday, an Israeli media report revealed that officials in Tel Aviv had lobbied the White House to condition any U.S. Lebanese aid based on the country removing advanced arms in possession of Hezbollah, something it should be noted that Lebanon's national forces are likely incapable of, given the Shia paramilitary organization is actually considered stronger. Remember, Hezbollah has fought the Israeli army, the fourth most powerful in the world, to a draw in Lebanon. Obviously, the Israelis want to weaken Hezbollah by making this move, and Trump naively went along with it, another despicable act. Meanwhile, Iraqi protests reached record levels, defying curfews and crackdowns. Public protests have been growing all week in Iraq, and what started as big have now reached a record level. On Friday, Iraq had the biggest mass demonstration since Saddam Hussein's ouster in the 2003 U.S. invasion and occupation. The protests continue to grow in spite of, in some cases, because of violent government crackdowns on public displays of dissent and threats to impose curfews in major cities that try to oppose order. Meanwhile, Greeks march against the migrant policy as the government takes in 40,000 more refugees in the last 4 months. Residents of a Greek city slated to host a fresh wave of asylum seekers took to the streets to protest the move, among growing anger over the influx of refugees that have poured into the country. The whole business of flooding Europe with these refugees, which appears to be a George Soros Israeli plan to destroy European culture, is now meeting massive backfire and resistance, but not after it's already inflicted tremendous damage on Europe and other nations. Scott.
Yeah, it has inflicted tremendous damage on Europe and every nation. This violent rape of Europe with this migrant refugee exodus, George Soros' Israeli Zionist plot to infect Europe, and they've said it in the Kalergi plan. This is a existential threat to Europe. It should be treated like a medical emergency, defending populations from a disease or a plague, because that's exactly what it is, and throw all of this, treasonous humanitarian nonsense and garble out the window, because we've seen the results of this mass infection of Middle East, African, people that don't have the culture, don't have the education, don't have the customs, don't have the personality at all, and throwing them into Europe has caused Europe just major trauma. And I think the only good thing is it's hopefully going to wake Europe out of this delusion and execute people like Merkel and Cameron and Sarkozy and everybody and anybody who's had any part of this. This needs to be really a French Revolution on a continental scale, only with a return to God and moral and family values and sovereignty as the impetus, not the communist social fascism of the original Robespierre French Revolution. So the Iraqi protests, I think, are CIA, Mossad, and the Iranians and the Russians have said the same thing. And it seems like another color revolution in the process, because Pompeo also came out and said the prime minister of Iraq and the president all need to listen to the Iraqi people, and the U.S. is on the side of the Iraqi people who want accountability and justice. Well, anytime you hear Pompeo say something like that, you know that son of a bee is the one who has been working and orchestrating with the CIA and the other regime change Bolton types to facilitate this. This is something they've been planning for 6 months. It's always a backup plan. we'll stir up a lot of hornet's nests if Iraq doesn't go the way we want. But the thing that they're really pissed off and scared about, Jim, is that Iran, Iraq, and Syria have linked their electrical grids, which essentially makes it, if you hit one of us and wipe out our electricity, you wipe out all of us, and then you've really got a World War I scenario. Jim?
Well, I think that's very important, Scott. And of course, the Iraqis have specified the Americans are not welcome in Iraq. When Trump was bringing our troops out of Syria into Iraq, he had not secured the permission of the Iraqi government. The fact that they're exercising independence and speaking up on behalf of the sovereignty of Iraq to get America out, no doubt, is what has fostered this movement among the people that is a fake democratic protest movement inspired by the CIA and Israel. I have no doubt you're spot on about that, Scott. It's disgusting. And that Donald Trump is allowing himself to be played by these deep state operatives is a profoundly disturbing circumstance.
Yeah, and it could cost him the election. It could, I mean, Tulsi Gabbard's becoming more and more attractive just because of the more and more unattractiveness that Donald Trump is clumsily exuding.
He's wasting some of his best cards here.
He is. He is.
Meanwhile, we have a divided House endorsing the impeachment inquiry into Trump, where House Democrats rallied behind the measure, setting out rules for the public phase of their impeachment inquiry into President Trump. Now, many Americans falsely believe there's been an impeachment vote on Trump. That's false. There's been a vote on conducting an impeachment inquiry, which appears to have been forced by the Republicans' protest. Hear this. A bitterly divided House of Representatives voted Thursday to endorse the Democratic-led impeachment inquiry into President Trump in an historic action that set up a critical new public phase of the investigation and underscored the political polarization that serves as its backdrop. The vote was 232 to 196 to approve a resolution that sets out rules for an impeachment process for which there are few precedents and which promises to consume the country a little more than a year before the 2020 election. It was only the third time in modern history the House had taken a vote on an impeachment inquiry into a sitting president. Having resisted such a vote for months, Democrats muscled through their resolution over unanimous Republican opposition, with only two of their members breaking ranks to vote no. One former Republican, now an independent, voted with the Democrats. The tally foreshadowed the battle to come as Democrats take their case against the president fully into public view, sending both parties into uncharted territory and reshaping the nation's political landscape. Meanwhile, Mitch McConnell, GOP, obviously forced the Democrats to vote. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said Tuesday that the Republican pressure obviously forced House Democrats to schedule Thursday's vote on a formal impeachment resolution. Actually, on a formal impeachment inquiry resolution. Obviously, they responded to the pressure we put on them to try to handle this in the most transparent way that meets basic standards of due process every American is entitled to, including even the president. Scott, we're close to the break, so I want to take your comments on this part now, just before we go. There's so much more to follow.
Well, this is the only good card, really, that Trump has is the impeachment and the insanity of the Democrats. Adam Schiff's shutting down all of the constitutional processes that are part of the impeachment process. They've never done it according to the Constitution. They've got a committee of half-wit Democrats, and now they're producing a half-wit impeachment. So all of the American people are against it because not only do they not hate Trump and they kind of like what he's doing domestically, but they hate the fact that these people in the Democrat Party think that they can arrogantly crush and stand upon the process of the Constitution just because they feel morally and virtuous morally superior. That's the sense that people get from these arrogant Nancy Pelosi's types that just shake their head when the people say, well, Trump didn't say what Adam Schiff said. And she goes, he said it. He said it. He didn't make it up. She shuts her eyes. She shuts her ears. She talks over people. That's the tyrant. that needs to be hung by the neck until dead after you give her a punch in the nose. Jim?
Well, it's stunning, Scott, because Adam Schiff was caricaturing the event. This is what he wished that Donald Trump had said. It was so outrageous. It was so blatant. It was such a gross distortion that Nancy Pelosi is discrediting herself. Not only that, but the Democrats were talking about impeaching Trump before his inauguration. The day of the inauguration, Madonna was talking about having dreams of blowing up the White House. The whole Russia hoax we've lived through for 2.5, nearly 3 years now turned out to be a complete fabrication. It's being exposed very thoroughly as a corrupt act by Obama leftovers, holdovers in the Department of Justice and the Democratic National Committee. Nothing was wrong about Trump's conversation with the Ukrainian president, an issue to which we shall return after the break. But the people are on it, Scott. They see this as Russia hoax 2.0. And I don't believe they're going to buy it whatsoever. The Democrats, just as they were exposed when Robert Mueller testified before Congress, he didn't know his own report. He had never heard of Fusion GPS. It was a disaster for the Democrats. I believe what we're going through now is going to be a parallel that's going to backfire even more seriously on the Democrats and destroy any lingering prospects they may have had for 2020.
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway.
And let's not forget, the reason that Trump is investigating or asked is because of Biden and his son, and the shenanigans of Biden's son being on the electrical company, and now Nancy Pelosi's son, Paul Pelosi Jr., is also implicated in being on this board. And Biden saying, I'm not going to give you taxpayer dollars unless you fire the prosecutor who's exposing injustice. That's the whole comical, demoniac, irony is, you're impeaching him for exposing your illegality and your corruption and your abusive process and your racketeering and bribery. All of that has got to come out, Jim.
When he boasted about it at the Council on Foreign Relations, and we have him on tape. I mean, it's absurd that the Democrats think they can get away with this charade. Don.
Yeah, but there's nothing to see here because Democrats are so pure and wholesome and wonderful, so there's no problem there. And we're exposing some problems in this government and the world here on Truth versus News here, the first hour. Why aren't you seeing that? I can't see that.
I don't know. It's very interesting, Don. Take us out, my friend. Take us out.
But essentially, thank you so much for watching. I wonder if you can see this. Can you see this? No,
yes.
Right.
Well, we could when you pulled it back. Then when you put it too far forward, Don.
Maybe.
Hold it further back. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. We're out of here, but stay tuned for the second hour. By the way, on Wednesday nights and Sunday nights, the second hour follows the first hour immediately. So tune in your DVRs and be on the scene here for 2 hours of uninterrupted, heavy political truth. So, okay, I will say second hour for right now.